Hello and welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville, Reverend Michelle Pennix, Lighthouse Christian Church, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, and Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. We begin this week with the tragedy in Minnesota, 2 young children and 17 others injured while attending a back-to-school mass.
Heartbreak at vigils across Minneapolis last night after the shooting at a school church that left 2 children dead during morning prayers. New details emerging about the 23-year-old suspect. Robin Westman once attended the school, and online posts from the church reveal Westman's mother previously worked there. Investigators have now searched the family home less than a mile away.
There was a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. All 3 had been lawfully purchased by the shooter.
Police, trying to determine a motive, are studying video Westman allegedly posted on YouTube. In the video, the suspect is seen driving a knife into a sketch of church pews and handling bullets, magazines, and guns. There are numerous references to previous mass shootings, including Sandy Hook, along with anti-Semitic messages. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the words "Kill Donald Trump" were also written on a rifle magazine. Police say Westman acted alone just before 8:30 a.m., shooting through the stained glass windows of Annunciation Catholic School toward the children sitting in the pews.
All we hear is pow, pow, pow. I had 2 buddies, and I told the little one and the other one to just get under the pew if they can. And I said a few prayers, and after I knew that I would be okay, because I knew I had God with me, I just tried to comfort others around me.
Police say the suspect used a 2x4 to try to barricade the doors from the outside, trapping in students ranging in age from pre-K to the 8th grade.
I think I got gunpowder on my neck.
10-year-old Weston says he hid in the pews and his friend dove on top of him during the gunfire, likely saving his life.
My friend got hit in the back.
Did he go to the hospital?
Yeah, he went to the hospital.
What went through your mind when you saw that?
I was super scared for him.
2 children, ages 8 and 10, were killed. 17 other people were shot, most of them children. Pat Scallon lives nearby and rushed to the scene.
And the one girl, it was really something. She said, "Just hold my hand, please." And I did.
Overnight, the police chief saying all of the injured children are expected to survive. The mayor also calling on people to, quote, stop villainizing the trans community after learning that the suspect, who was born male, identified as female with a name change 5 years ago from Robert to Robin.
And our prayers are with the Catholic community of Annunciation and those dealing with this horrific tragedy. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I've been by that church. I have some friends in Minnesota that I'm going to visit next week. And it's not very far from the airport, so I remember seeing that church several times. And as a former pastor of several schools, parishes with schools, this is horrifying, especially during a religious service, just after the first reading, where somebody starts shooting like this. It seems to be repeated so many different ways. And we still don't do anything about it. I mean, it's just unfortunately damnable and demonic. And now, again, it just rings up all the, mental health is a major, major problem among youth, young adults, maybe even adults these days, and that we're not dealing with well. And if anything, we shouldn't be cutting back money for funding for such things. But I think, one of the things that's probably going to happen is that we're going to have, as Stan and I were talking before, about having police around our services. Sometimes that's going to be an extra expense, but you got to have somebody. Unfortunately, these days, most schools lock down, and Michelle can certainly talk about that. As a former principal, it's just absolutely tragic to happen, especially at that time. But all schools, and I think, what did I hear today? There have been 44 mass shootings so far this year in 8 months. What does that tell you?
Absolutely.
There needs to be help for those children and those staff members who survived. I cannot imagine what those families are going through, and especially God knows the families whose children were murdered. But it's becoming all too common. And, you know, I hate to say the same thing I've been saying before, but it's the ability to acquire weapons of mass destruction and the availability of those. And something has to be done. And we're not moving in that direction. And so, yes, there needs to be a police presence at every house of worship. Every house of worship, and not just for the service, that's the obvious. But if there is a school attached to that institution, there has to be a police presence there. And there has to be a training of staff and members of the congregation how to deal with those situations. I know in our community there is actively this training going on. I just pray that more institutions avail themselves of this and that they never, ever have to manifest it. They never have to use it.
Well, and I'll say, if I can, of course, my prayers are with them. We were on here not many months ago about another shooting, and, you know, we keep coming back to the same things, and you know, the fact that, you know, we not only deal with the perpetrators a lot of times of these acts of violence who have been in our presence in our community, but we also have to deal with the families of the perpetrators after an event is committed, and all the emotions that go with that. But two nuanced ideas that I'd like to bring up if I can. One is, and I think this is important, something we look at in these times. I hate to see young people interviewed after a tragedy like this. The trauma that they go through in that moment, they are not even beginning to process it yet. And to put a camera in front of them and ask questions, we used to not do that. You never saw children in that way. And I just like to go back to a time where we didn't. I really don't think that now is the time to hear that voice. They need immediate support. But the second thing, and I think that is just as important, is to me, it comes down to a matter of leadership in our communities, in our places of worship. We know enough now about the perpetrators of these mass shootings. There's a data profile. And to be very explicit with this, we know that 99% of these are committed by white male youth under the age of 34 and under. And as a principal, one of the things that we used to always do, and I laugh about it, we used to call them our soldiers. These were the kids that came in every day who we knew that if they didn't have a good day, none of us would. Nobody else would. And I still walk the community like all of us do, and I see people sometimes and I think, that looks like a kid that needs some help. That looks like somebody who needs support. And I would really like to see a time where leadership comes to that press conference and says, listen, these are the exact things that we are doing to address these concerns. We have this available in the community. We have this available in the community. But we need to start with the truth, with asking what is happening. What are we not providing? What are they missing? And it's all youth, but in particular, when we have a data profile that says white males this age, we got to start asking the questions and providing support where necessary.
Well, there is a lot. You mentioned data and tragic trend. I want to just look at the data. You were spot on about the data. We have enough data to make some responsible analysis. This is not a tragedy. The news always starts off with a tragic. No, it's not a tragedy. It's sad. It's horrible, but it's not. It's a trend. It's a recurring trend that needs to be like we have a weather report every day, we can just do a mass shooting report every day. Predict it's just a trend that is going to happen, recurring over and over and over again. And the sad reality is that this happened in Minneapolis. Minneapolis ends with polis. Polis is a root word for Polish city, means city, but also the same root word for policies and also politicians. And all are complicit in some way. It's said that this individual acquired the guns legally. So it required some politician, some policy that permitted that to happen. Okay, that's one thing. And then also it also challenges us to look at what has happened, the Sandy Hooks of the world. It's been so long a list. I watched Jon Stewart the other day. He called out a long list by name of all these mass shootings, and did occur in mass, sad to say. Mass is not only just for a worship service with the Catholic. And now it's a term we use so often when it comes to a mass, quote, shooting. That's become common in our vocabulary. But he was just calling off a long list of all of the shootings that has taken place and all the thoughts and the prayers that has been indicated and asked for during these times of great horror. And we'll be talking about prayer in a moment. But there's a recurring trend. It is a trend. Sad to say, it's not just a trend, it's a trend. And it's oftentimes created and permitted by policies and politicians that create the environment to allow these type horrible occurrences to keep reoccurring. And I think that attention needs to be given to that, as well as the database that is there. If you know, if you have a certain profile that we profile everything else, we profile certain scientific data for health reasons, for diagnosing diseases. If you have a certain recurring trend of data in your database, it's worth looking at that database and try to have a preemptive strike before the strike occurs. And I think that these occasions, another occasion where the children, sad to say, are sacrificed on the altar of the cross, rather, of the Second Amendment, and children have always been sacrificed on the altar for the support of a tyrannical government in one form or another, and this is just no exception. So I think that on the moral side, there is a moral side to take. Morality never takes both sides; it takes a side, and I think that's something that's necessary in relation to policy decisions, and not so much the wickedness, but as James Baldwin said, oftentimes it's not the wicked that destroys us, it's the spineless. And I think there needs to be some courage taken to make some strong looks at policy as well as the data that is available too.
I think one of the other things that strikes me is that, you know, a lot of these things, this young man put a lot of stuff on social media. And I think that families and friends have got to start saying, you know, when I see start of these things, I start getting concerned rather than just avoiding it like a plague. And I'm trying not to knock parents about it, because sometimes they don't get to see it. You know, our kids are in their own little world, and but I guess we've all got to look when we start posting these kind of things as he posted, and this has happened again, the trend. There's a lot of things that gets online long before this happens. I think we've all got to be alert to say, this person needs some help, and now how to get them the help is another whole question. But I think we've all got to be on alert about that.
And that comes back to a point we were talking about just a couple of weeks ago regarding the shooting that happened on the first week of school, and a dad that came forward and said, you know, I tried to get help. We need to make sure that the systems we have in place are adequate to support families that say, I need help. You know, very often you can have a child who is displaying signs that worry you, but what's the next step? Where do you go for help? And I think we haven't done enough a good enough job at making that public. And that's why I say it goes back to leadership. You know, this is a public health crisis. This is an emergency. This is a reason to call a press conference, not just at the highest levels, but at our local levels, for people to stand up and say, listen, if you are concerned about a child in your family, if you're concerned about a child and you and others, you know, it's not just one, have this concern, this is the process you go to get help. I just don't think that parents have access and knowledge of those systems today. I think that they just say, you know, I did the best I could, or I don't know what to do, or it is what it is. And we are way past that time. We talked about parent responsibility. Or you all did just last week, I think it was.
We talked about it on our radio show.
Yeah,
We had
it's the same thing. It's the same thing with this. You know, I would doubt to say that most parents of these perpetrators are not surprised. They're shocked, they're disappointed in that moment. But when you talk to them later, they always come out in the interview, you know, well, he was troubled, or this, you know, I saw this from him. Well, then we need to start saying, why weren't you able to reach out for help? Why didn't you have that? And it's our responsibility, I think, of leaders in the community to make sure, and the clergy, that people know there is assistance and available.
And this wasn't on the dark web. This was on YouTube. This is where I go to YouTube to watch religious services. I don't go to YouTube, but if this is there, then I guess sources like YouTube, like Instagram, like TikTok, not need to be censored. That we're not going to go there, but need.
Well, they're already doing it on social media. I mean, if you say the wrong thing and do, you know, issue the wrong word, they'll take you off of social media just like that.
Yeah.
But then what, Clay?
I don't know.
There needs to be
step two, policed already.
To get these folks and deal with their problem so that they will not cause a situation like happened yesterday at Annunciation Church and School. I mean, just this is
excuse me, Steve.
No, go, please.
One of the things that we were going to kind of tie to was this whole idea. There's been a little bit of controversy that I guess the mayor of Minnesota said, you
That's
know,
a great
prayer.
Well, let them do the segue.
No, we got to clip the show about prayer. So,
Okay,
yeah, so it's a good transition, and there's been a lot of discussion about thoughts and prayers, and Jen Psaki said this last night on MSNBC, followed by Scott Jennings, a Louisville resident, by the way.
I know I've heard from a lot of friends and family and viewers today about people who watched this tragedy, watched you speaking out today. We're sort of grateful to you for saying it stopped tweeting things like thoughts and prayers, which I felt the same way.
I actually had a negative reaction to the mayor's statements today. I think it's wrong, frankly, to vilify or attack people of faith. You said thoughts and prayers ring hollow. I think thoughts and prayers are the most solid on days of tragedy for people who live their faith every day. And I think on a day like today, particularly in a church community, there are probably people praying harder for comfort today than they have ever prayed in their life. And so I think, and I've heard others on the left today that go down this line of attack against people of faith, sort of denigrating the idea that they might want to pray today. And so I think his statements were misguided.
So, panel, your thoughts on this seemingly dismissing thoughts?
I have to confess, I have to agree with Scott Jennings. This is the day, for the record, I agree with Scott Jennings on his statement there. It did not ring, his words did not ring hollow. I understand why the mayor may have said thoughts and prayers, because it does, that term rings hollow. But prayer always brings God to the fight, and we need God involved in the fight. The Bible says in 2 Chronicles, I believe, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then I hear from heaven to heal the land. So there's a call for prayer and to repent and to turn from what you were doing to do something different once you hear from heaven. So I think we have not heard from heaven and done the will of God on earth as it is in heaven. And if we do, I think it could produce a different result. So I'm a strong advocate for prayer, true prayer, and repentance as a result of the prayer that we lift up to God to get guidance from God to remedy this horrible thing that keeps recurring in our midst on earth.
I think one of the things that it's a false dilemma here. I don't think it's either prayer or action. It's both and. Today we happen to be taping on the feast of St. Augustine, which is the Pope's community too. And he has a famous line, pray as if everything depended upon God, and act as if everything depended upon you.
Indeed.
And I think that's kind of the balance that, sometimes it's all thoughts and prayers, no action. Well, you got to do the action. Sometimes it's all action and no prayer, and you need both of them. So, I mean, I think part of it is how do we balance that? Prayer should lead to action, and action should lead to prayer.
And I think the Bible tells us when it says faith without works is dead.
Indeed.
So I think we're absolutely correct in saying that our faith is the cornerstone of our lives, but also what a difference it makes in times of tragedy. So I will go on record, too, with saying that, I agree with what Scott Jennings said. But here's the point that I think we've got to zero in on more and more. The thing that he said that I think causes issue is to specifically call out or say, I've heard people on the left saying this all day.
He made it political.
This is not a political issue. And I think we continue to divide our country whenever we use those very static terms to describe people's responses. The children that were murdered had parents that were right and left and middle. And we always need to remember that. And that is what pushes people away from the faith when we really get into identities and how people can be labeled. So I think that now it's about action, it's about leadership, it's about why we're not having a press conference every time that this comes up at the highest levels, and I'm talking about city, state, and national, to declare this an emergency. And this is what the steps are to avoid this from happening again. This is how you can get some support and help.
In Jewish tradition, right now, we are involved in 40 days of repentance leading up to our new year and concluding with our Day of Atonement. And let me tell you, there are lots of prayers over 40 days. But the prayers are always coupled with actions. The prayers are always coupled with deeds. If you sin, you must recognize the sin. If the sin is against another human being, then you must go to that human being and ask for their forgiveness, but not just saying, gee, I'm sorry, forgive me. Gee, I'm sorry, what can I do for you to enable me to have your forgiveness?
I've been a part of a campaign about some 20 years ago. We had a campaign in Louisville I was leading called No Murders Metro. You may have heard about that. But in that note, Father Travis has been a part of that too. But in that campaign we started about 20 years ago, it was a prayer vigil at every murder site in Louisville. And when we started that campaign in 2004, for the first 31 days, we didn't have a single murder in Louisville, not one. For 31 days, okay? And then also as a result of that campaign, we did faithfully for another 2 or 3 years. It led to other campaigns, other programs that we connected with the mayor, with the then Chief White. It led to a whole host of things that grew from that prayer vigil that we were faithful to commit at the murder site of every murder in the city of Louisville. So I'm a witness that prayer does change things. Amen. And prayer does work for those who are committed to the change that they are seeking to make, and for those who pray in earnest for God to come in and to pray God's will on earth as it is in heaven. It's not your will, but God's will. And I think that with that attitude, with that sincere heart, I think a difference can be made when we invoke God's presence in the fight to be engaged here on earth. We need help.
And one of the things about prayer, I mean, we could get into that, but, prayer is not just asking God, I need this, I need this. prayer is also saying, I need to shut up and listen to God.
Absolutely.
What is God saying to me? What is God saying to our community? What's God saying that we need to live out? And so it's both asking for, but hearing what God has got to say. And I think a lot of times we're not listening to what God tells us.
Right. We want God to hear what we have to say. We won't tell God what to do. He's a genie in a box. So it's like rubbing the lamp 3 times and expecting him to do what we want done.
And one of the things that I hope that the families that were involved in this tragedy and anyone who's watching will today know that one of the things that God tells us is that he is never as close as he is in times of tragedy. That God is close to the brokenhearted. And, you know, when this happens so often, one of the things that, you know, the public says is, you know, well, where is God? And the question we all hear, why do bad things happen to good people? And I think you can see by the guests that are up here that our faith is reflected in how we try to act that out and how we try to live and to be in this world. And it's important that, you know, you don't just look at what we bring to the community, our work, our mission, our co-mission, but that you see for yourself. You come into our places of worship and you ask the questions that you're struggling with, because we're here because of the moral side. We're here because we've connected with our moral side and what a difference that's made in our lives, and I think it will for others as well.
And God does connect with our pain. You know, people ask, where is God? Like when Christ was crucified on the cross, we say, where is God? Well, he's the same place he was when his son died, when his child was crucified.
Why does God not stop this?
Right.
And God, you know, God gave us free will.
Absolutely.
That was a big mistake on God's part.
But God gave us something else too.
Right.
And what God gave us is we are beings all created in God's image and likeness. And that means that we have an inclination to do good, and I interpret that an inclination to be godly. But it's also a matter of choice. We can go in that direction. It's not the easiest, and sometimes it's the most frightening, but we can manifest that through our behavior.
Well said, Stan, and we're going to have to end the conversation there this week. Great, thank you very much. Very good discussion this week. We've had 2 weeks of very good discussions in a row now. As Michelle mentioned, last week's show was a great show. So thank you to Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville, Reverend Michelle Pennix, Lighthouse Christian Church, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, and Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. Thanks for watching and listening to Moral Side of the News. Join us again next week for an all-new show.